everyone, I'm Heather from Here She Grows, and today I'm doing one of my most favorite things in my winter garden. I'm feeding the birds. Birds are an important part of my garden all year long, and I want to make sure I have things set out in the garden for them so that they come back throughout the season. And it's really important to have things in addition to seed heads out there, especially toward the end of winter. Right now we're in January, so we're not getting there yet. But by the end of winter, all of those seed heads that we've left up have been depleted. They're most likely gone, so it becomes a little trickier for them to find food. So by having things spaced around your garden and a variety of different things, you invite those beautiful birds back into your yard, and you have some winter entertainment, which is really nice during the down season. So I just thought I'd show you what I do. And first off, I want to point out this really cool thing up here. That is a suction cup feeder that you put nut butter on. So I got that at Wildbirds Unlimited. So I will link to everything that I mentioned in this video in the description below. But it's really cool. And the interesting thing about it is I got kind of impatient with it because it took forever for the birds to find it. And on the shepherd's hook here, I put a suet cage. So I think once the suet cage ran out, all the suet was gone, then they decided to go up there and try that out. And just the other day, I think that's been up there for at least a month before I finally witnessed a bird on those perches, and now they're there every morning. It's really nice to be able to sit in my family room in the morning, have my coffee, and have some beautiful winter birds up on this feeder now. And you might see some of these decals around here too. Those are called Winter Gems. They're from Winter Gem Studio. I just put those on about a month ago as well. And not only are they beautiful, but they're a way of preventing bird strikes. I'm forgetting the number, but it's a staggering amount. I think it's like 1 billion birds in the United States die from window strikes every year. So to prevent that, I love putting these decals up, and I found these really beautiful ones from Winter Gem Studio and started putting them on all the windows where birds might strike. I've had bird strikes before, and it always breaks my heart when it happens. I also put them on my sliding glass door as well, because that is the biggest window, and I do get several bird strikes on there when there aren't decals on there. So I have those all over the place as well. So I thought I'd point out a few things to you and explain to you what I do and why I do it. If you're gonna locate your feeders close to your windows, and that's where I like to have mine in the wintertime, I love to see the birds up close, but you wanna make sure they're really close to the house. So you don't want them more than 3 feet away from that window, because then you run the risk of bird strikes. Or you want to locate them 10 feet away. So that distance between 3 and 10 feet is kind of your danger zone. So like for instance, my shepherd's hook here is about 2 feet off the side of my house away from the window. So I can view them. There's less of a chance of having window strikes, and then the window gems hopefully will alert them that that is not something they can fly through. So the very first thing I like to do, I always get out my suet cages. I really don't use my suet cages in the summertime. I use them more in the wintertime. And for that, I just put bricks of suet in there, and they're ready-made suet. You can make your own suet. I've never done that before, and I'm sure you could find that somewhere on YouTube or the internet. But all suet is, and I've got a couple different varieties here. I like to get a variety. Suet is simply just beef fat, and then there's a number of different ingredients mixed in. Like this one is a nut and raisin thing. You might find seeds in there, nuts, dried fruits. There are also suet cakes that have red pepper added to it to make it really spicy, so it deters squirrels. Keep in mind though, wherever you hang bird feeders, you're gonna have other critters as well. So you might have squirrels and raccoons, depending on where you are. I have squirrel issues. They've not climbed this yet. On the suet cakes, I attract a lot of downy woodpeckers. I get a lot of red-bellied woodpeckers, nuthatches, and it's really just that simple. But I think I want to put this one over in the veg garden, and I'm going to put a different feeder here first. So let's go hang this, and I got it caught in my glove. All right, let's go hang this. So I like to hang this one on my hog panel trellis, and suet cakes are great for attracting things like woodpeckers. I get a couple different varieties. I get the downy, which is that really little guy. I get a red-bellied woodpecker. I have seen a flicker from time to time. I'll get nuthatches on here, chickadees from time to time, but suet cakes are just really easy, and I like to buy the no-melt ones, because as things warm up in the wintertime, you're not going to have a drippy, gooey mess here. These things stay nice and solid, and they attract a lot of different birds. Now, if you're only going to put out one seed, I think the best thing to put out in the wintertime, and the most nutritious seed, very high fat, is going to be black oiled sunflower seed. Birds expend a lot of energy, and in the summertime that's no big deal because there's plenty of food sources available. But in the wintertime, when things get a little scarcer and they need something that's high fat, gives them a really good food source, black oiled sunflower seeds are the way to go. Now this one is my most entertaining feeder, and I'll tell you why in a minute. It hangs from my pergola. It hangs from my pergola, and the squirrels have a heck of a time figuring it out, but they climb up the wisteria that's on the other side, and then they launch themselves either out of the wisteria or out of my Centennial Blush Magnolia, and they're acrobats. It's comical, but I also get a lot of blue jays, and I know a lot of you have expressed dislike for the blue jay call. They are a little annoying, but they cannot resist what I'm about to put in here. This is a peanut feeder, and it draws blue jays and woodpeckers like crazy. For my wreath feeder, I like to do unsalted in-the-shell peanuts, and it takes a little time to fill it out, but it's so worth it for what it's going to attract. As soon as I hang this thing, it's like a word goes out among the bird community, particularly the jays and the woodpeckers, that the peanuts are out and it's time to just flood it with activity. So my next one might be a bit of a surprise, and it's something I do every year, and I wonder sometimes if my neighbors think it's a little bizarre, but it involves peanut butter and trees. And I like to get the natural peanut butter. You can get chunky too, the birds probably will like that equally as much, but I get the Smucker's natural peanut butter, and if you're familiar with natural, it has an oil on the top of it, so you want to give that, want to give it a stir, get all that oil incorporated, which might take a little bit. I won't bore you on camera stirring up my peanut butter. A little whisk comes in handy for incorporating the oil back into the peanut butter. Now for the fun part. Like I mentioned with my other peanut feeder, like I mentioned earlier, peanuts and nuts of all kinds really are great sources of fat and very nutritious for birds in the wintertime. So you simply just take your peanut butter and you start slapping it on all your trees, and you'll find that things like the chickadees and the nuthatches and the woodpeckers are gonna, there you go, it'll drip down, it'll freeze on there, it's not gonna harm your trees, and you just start putting it wherever you think a bird would appreciate it. I already hear a woodpecker. They know. Making a mess of myself, but you wanna try and do a thin layer. You don't wanna glob it on because it will drip. We've got 3-degree temperatures coming in the next couple days, so this is gonna, if it's still here by then, it's gonna freeze on there and be a really nice source of fat and calories for the birds. Now this feeder I use for my mealworms, and mealworms, they're dried mealworms. So, and I like this feeder because I can exclude certain species of birds. Like if I were to leave the hood up on this all the way, you know, let me put this in my pocket. If I were to leave the hood up on this feeder, then I'd have all kinds of things. I'd have cowbirds in there, the starlings would be in there, and they would just decimate anything that I put in here. So with this, you can adjust the hood on it and lower it so that all you're getting are the smaller birds. And it has these little notches to keep the hood in place. And then I like to put this in my crabapple trees just outside my dining room windows. And I want to make sure that I'm not damaging, whoops, I want to make sure that I'm not damaging the branch. So I bought this little extender. It's a cable extender. It has a coating on it, $5 from Wildbirds Unlimited. I'm not partnering with Wildbirds. I just happen to buy a lot of their products. I really like their products. But the nice thing about this is it's a, let's set this down. It's a plastic coated cable that wraps around your tree, and then your hanger goes here, and then you're not going to have issues with the cable digging into the branch of your tree and, you know, possibly damaging it. So you'd simply just wrap this around the trunk. Well, I'll just show you. For the purposes of the video, I would never hang a feeder this low. You want to make sure you're hanging it high enough so predators like cats can't reach the feeder. But to show you how this works, you just take your cable, and the plastic part is what's going to be in contact with your branch. And then it has 2 loops at the end, and you simply just take your feeder and slip it through the loops. And you've got a feeder that's hung, and it's not going to damage the trunk of your tree. And since we're by my prairie fire crab, I should mention that having plants like this, or trees and shrubs that have berries the birds love, is a really nice thing to have in your garden to attract birds as well. So this is usually covered in robins during the winter time, and they will be here all winter until they gobble all these up. So prairie fire crab is a really clean crab too, so I don't find crab apples all over the ground. These are devoured by the birds, and it flowers beautifully. So one of my favorite trees. And then I like to add mealworms to this, so I'll be attracting a lot of nuthatches. There'll be woodpeckers on this. In the springtime, a lot of people put out live mealworms for the bluebirds. These are dried mealworms. They kind of have a funky odor, but it's just dead worms. Oops. So as I was adjusting the cap, which can be a little cumbersome sometimes, I launched mealworms everywhere. But you just lift the hood on this, and you fill your feeder with your mealworms. And then the cap also prevents moisture from getting in there. I mean, they're going to get wet eventually, depending on if we get rain, and if it rains sideways, then you have more of a chance of it getting nice and soggy and gross. But I typically don't see that too often because these get eaten up really, really fast. So then you just lower your lid, and having it lower like this means that there'll be less of the big birds like the starlings and the cowbirds that want to just destroy this. And then I just hang it in my tree, and it's that simple. And I will hang this higher, of course, but that's what it looks like. Not every bird feeds from a hanging feeder. So there are ground feeders too, and I like to make sure that I'm putting out seed to accommodate them as well. So ground feeders you'll often find beneath hanging feeders, and they're catching everything that drops from those feeders. So things like cardinals, black-capped chickadees, mourning doves. I like to use my houseplant trays that I put underneath the houseplants to catch the water. I'll clean those out and fill these with a little bit of seed. Oftentimes it'll be black-oiled sunflower seed. I also like to buy a mix of seed too, and just kind of throw anything in there that I have, and it's interesting who shows up, and I always end up having a lot of bird activity on the patio. Backyard bird feeding can get really expensive. So I suggest if you want to start small and not break the bank, start with black oiled sunflower seeds. They appeal to the most species of birds, very high in fat, very nutritious. So it's really nice to provide that food source during the winter time. And also keep in mind, when you welcome songbirds into your backyard, you inevitably will have other creatures, specifically predatory birds like Cooper's hawks. I have several of those in the backyard, and it's always sad to watch them hunt. And I know that when things get quiet back here, even though I've got my feeders filled, the birds are hiding because something's here hunting. And I know that Cooper's hawk is around. As difficult as it is to watch that happen, it's nature. And I love seeing the Cooper's hawk just about as much as I love seeing all the other birds in my backyard. And because I provide these different things throughout the course of the year, I have such a beautiful variety of creatures in my backyard. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Subscribe would be fantastic. I'd love to have you along. And if you never want to miss a video, and I post usually every Friday, if you never want to miss a video, hit that bell and YouTube will alert you every time I have a new video up. So thanks for being here, guys. I'll catch you in the next one, and happy bird watching.